Kia ora tātou, no kiri roa ahau, ko Lipsey toku whānau, ko Kalym toku ingoa, nā mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Up until the last couple of years or so, I felt like an outsider in New Zealand sociology, and Nicole briefly touched on the reasons for that in that awesome introduction. Thank you, Nicole. It was mainly because of my background and the way that I was choosing to apply my research skills in the worlds that I was working in. So as an example of that, it was very rare that I would go to a conference and not hear some comment about business or marketing specifically that I could take personally. Now, of course, a lot of that is about my reactions to those comments rather than the intention of the speaker, but the end result was the same. And that was me feeling like an outsider in New Zealand sociology. I don't anymore, but we're going to get to that soon. I'm going to come back to that. So hello to all of you here this afternoon and to those watching back later. Firstly, a huge thank you to the reps for the efforts you've put in organising this series and to Casimir for his support in that. So as Nicole politely indicated, I'm going to say it a bit more bluntly, David and I are approaching this seminar a little bit differently to what we were asked to do. We're going to take this opportunity to show you an example of the work you can do outside of academia using sociological thinking and sociological principles. I'm going to touch on some of the pathway stuff for the next 10 minutes or so, and then go more into subjective aspects of that pathway conversation. And then it'll be over to David to entertain us. And he is very entertaining, even at nearly 10 p.m. at night. So my education started in business, as that little picture on your screen indicates. I graduated with a business degree in 2010, and I immediately started working in the market research field. Essentially, I worked for various businesses profiling their audiences, telling them who to market to. And like most market researchers, this was done using demographic categories and demographic stereotypes. So, Mr. Businessman, those most likely to buy your product are female. They are aged 25 to 34. Their income is blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Of course, these categories label us, but they do not define us. You don't wake up on the morning of your 35th birthday and suddenly prefer a new brand of toothpaste just because you're in a different age category. However, so working in market research, but then had some life dramas. And after probably one of the lowest points in my life, I packed up my suitcase and I moved to Auckland to basically start again. And part of this starting again was returning to tertiary education. And this time it was to study sociology. Since then, pathway stuff, I've completed a BA, an MA, and yes, I'm in the final year of a PhD. And I say that with my fingers crossed, final year of a PhD. More pathway stuff. I now give 3 or 4 guest talks a year on my research and on my experiences combining those two things, different topics. Have published a couple of articles and a chapter in a textbook for one of the core BA courses at Massey. And of course, I'm heavily involved with SAANZ. Now, I say those things not to say, look at me, I've done some cool stuff. I say those things to highlight the importance of networking, the importance of credibility. So when you get the opportunities to give talks like these, having published articles on the topic you're talking about automatically indicates credibility. The textbook chapter I was talking about, obviously I had the knowledge to write that, but the reason I was asked to write it was because of a personal contact. My name was put forward. So the importance of networking already appears in this pathway story. It took me studying sociology, though, to realize how stereotypical those demographic categories are. And as I understood sociology more, the way I profiled these audiences in the market research world changed quite dramatically. Instead of relying on demographic stereotypes, I started to profile in a multidimensional humanistic way, profiling people with real wants and needs and expectations, and of course, values. instead of just a bunch of statistics on a piece of paper. Instead of telling Mr. Businessman that his most likely customer was a 35-year-old female, I started to talk about the drives and the motivations and the cultural things that we learn about in sociology. People don't buy products or make any decision because of their demographic categories. They make these decisions because it fills a want, a need, or expectation, or it speaks to a value. And of course, this is the same for not-for-profit stuff, which David and I have done quite a bit of work in. People give to certain causes not because of a demographic category. It's because of a value or a want or a need or an expectation. So why did I make this change? Why did these profiles start to change from those stereotypical set of statistics to these multi-dimensional rich profiles? It's because sociology taught me that we are not our labels. A few years after this, I met David, and eventually the Value Graphics project was born. David is going to talk shortly about this and give you examples again of doing sociology in a world outside of academia. Before he does that, I'm just going to touch on a couple of other things here. Firstly, a note on the usefulness of quantitative research in social sciences. Today's cordial is about using sociological thinking in the business world. But I just want to pause there and I just want to point out the importance of quantitative in social sciences. Now, of course, quant has benefits that qualitative doesn't, and vice versa. However, unfortunately, quantitative doesn't always get its due in New Zealand sociology. It's quite often pushed down as the poor cousin. I want to pause there and just highlight why that is problematic. The power of quant enables you to understand and identify features of populations, to do things like test causal relationships between different sets of values. And this is not going to turn into a quant versus qual argument because, as Nicole has already told you, I'm using qualitative for my PhD. But what I'm saying here is, as you're a student, as you go through your student pathway into your academic success, academic qualifications, etc., whenever you get an opportunity to use different research methods, it's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you about your studies. Do it. Even if you have preferred, even if you prefer interviews, focus groups, observational research, if you get an opportunity to do quant, take it. It'll be very valuable to you if your pathway takes you outside of academia. One more thing, and then we're going to listen to David. Casimir briefly mentioned this last month, but I want to really dig into it further here. I'm talking about understanding your why. Above everything else I say today, this is probably the best piece of advice I can give you. Understanding your why. And that's not just about your pathway, it's about your life. If you ever need to start again, if you ever need to rebuild, whatever, understanding your why. My why has gotten me through a very challenging PhD. Mine and David's shared whys drive us to rid the world of demographic stereotypes and the harm those stereotypes do. And of course, change the way companies and organizations look at and understand their audiences. But for me, it goes further than that. If you know your why and your intention is pure, then go where it takes you. As I've gotten in touch with my various whys, I've become increasingly comfortable with how I chase them. Now, of course, I am passionate about various causes, like everyone in this room is, but I am neutral on others, and I'm not afraid to say that because it's okay, because I know my why and I'm chasing it with a pure intention. Sociology and, of course, some life dramas have taught me that that's okay. I'm going to drop screen share here and just finish by talking directly to you, not my cute pictures. And what I want to say, and the point of that little ramble at the end there was, don't worry about what others think of your career path. Don't worry about if others have a different interpretation of what doing sociology means, or more likely, where the best place to do sociology is. David is about to show you that the Value Graphics project, as one example, is making a difference by doing sociology in corporate America and all around the world. And of course, there are many other examples of people doing similar. So whatever your why is for you. And as long as you're going through your life's journey with that pure intention attached to that why, then please do not let others tell you how to apply your skills or where to apply your passion. Don't let others tell you what to care about. Your why is yours, and whatever it is, it's okay. Kia ora tātou, ko David Allison takuhoa. I now hand you over to my colleague and my friend, David, the values guy, Allison, as he is now known on social media. And yes, he joins us from his home in Canada. So thank you, David, because it's fast approaching 10 p.m. Over to you, mate.
Thanks so much. They're a hard act to follow. I think I pushed the right button and everybody should be able to see me fairly large now. I'm also going to push this other button here. So I've set my timer so I don't go for too long. Great. So I'm not entirely sure how we're going to connect these two pieces of the conversation today. I am going to talk to you about the Value Graphics Project. And it is a way that sociology is making an impact in the world through corporate organizations. I like to think about the fact that we're creating amplification and megaphones out of corporations. In order to get corporations to work with us and to understand things the way we would like them to understand them, we got to show them how they can make some more money. That's what corporations are all about. I'm not going to listen to you unless you got some way that you're going to help them improve the things they're paying attention to. But if you think about this as a kind of Trojan horse, what we're doing is convincing some of the largest organizations in the world to change the way they look at people. And if they change the way they look at people, they're spreading that philosophy to millions of people. Now, I can stand on a soapbox in the middle of town square and talk about this till my face is blue and I die of old age. And I might reach 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people in the course of my lifetime. We get one big corporation to start changing the way they look at people and the way they think about humans around the world. That's going to have a far greater impact. And if the cost of doing that is helping them make an extra buck, I think that's a fair trade. We all got to make a buck. We all got to pay our rent and pay our mortgages and buy our groceries. So that's what drives me and the team at the Value Graphics Project. We're capitalists. We're working in the world of commerce. I realize many people in academia think that that automatically brands us as being other. But I think once I'm done today, maybe I'll have just shifted your perception. Anybody who's watching this as a video later on, maybe I've shifted your perceptions just a little bit around how sometimes working in this world can actually accomplish some really great things. So let me start my presentation and show you what I put together for you today. I always start by, people when they see me speak, when they listen to what we're talking about, they like, why you? How did you get into this? How did this begin? And so I always tell the story about Bob and Sally and the mysterious 90%. See, I used to have a marketing strategy firm, a creative services firm, and our clients were real estate developers. They were building big giant condos or resort communities, office complexes, sometimes entire little villages and cities and towns. And they would come to us and say, what do we call this thing? How are we going to sell this thing? How do we get people to pay attention and buy a condo in our condo tower or our resort community instead of the other guys? And like everything in the business world, we always started with a description of a target audience that was based on demographics and sometimes another batch of data that we'll call psychographics, everything from past purchase behavior to emotional indexes to all kinds of other stuff like that that doesn't really fit into the demographic pool. And based on that information, we'd run around for a couple of years and spend $1 million of our clients' money, and we'd sell a bunch of condos in a tower. And the neat thing about that particular sector of the economy is about a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes 3, 4 years after you finish the job, you get to stand in a room. They've built the tower. It's ribbon cutting day, and you're in the room with a glass of cheap champagne and shrimp on a stick, and you're looking and seeing all the people in the room who came and bought a condo. And every single time we did this was for about 12 years, the first thing that popped into my head when I started looking around that room is, who are these people? There was about 10 or 15% of them matched the target audience description. The rest of them, I hadn't written a campaign for them. We hadn't bought media in any of the channels that they were listening to. We didn't do anything intentionally for them, yet here they were. So there was this mysterious 85 or 95, 90% of the room. We had no idea why they were there. So when I sold my company to management, I said, I'm going to see if we can't sort this out. And this is when I kind of took a step back and looked at the landscape and said, really, what is this about? This is about how people make decisions. Every single organization on earth is trying to do exactly the same thing, no matter how big or small they are. They're all just trying to find some people and get them to make a decision that they would like them to make. You can talk about that engaging or motivating or activating or any of those kinds of words, but basically it's about how do people make decisions. So that's what we decided that we needed to sort out. And this is around this moment when Kalym and I ran into each other and started thinking about how important values are when it comes to determining how every human on the planet makes their decisions about everything they encounter all day long. So I want to tell you a story about three friends in an alley at midnight. And if you run into anybody in your life who's doubting how important values are, how vital they are to understanding human decision-making, this is the story to remember and tell them. So three friends are out having a few drinks. They haven't seen each other for a very long time because COVID, pandemic, lockdown, restriction. We all know the reasons we haven't been able to go out to our favorite pub and have a few drinks with our friends. And so they're enjoying themselves and maybe had a few drinks too many. And the smart one in the group says, you know what, we should call this. We have that SAANZ seminar we have to go to tomorrow at the end of the day, and we don't want to be too hungover for that. So we should get out of here. So they're walking down the street, and you know what happens when three drunk friends start walking down the street late at night and it's dark, they get a little louder and they're punching each other in the shoulder and having a great time and singing a song, and somebody's getting a noogie and it's just crazy stuff is going on. And then they turn a corner and suddenly there's a dark alley. They have to decide, what are they going to do? Now, friend number one, the only thing we know for certain is friend number one's primary value in life is experiences, and things going down that dark alley is the best way we could possibly end this evening. How much fun is that going to be? Who knows what might happen? Come on, guys, let's go. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. Let's go. And friend number two says, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because friend number two's primary value in life is security. He says, no, not going down that dark alley. What a ridiculous idea. Let's go back to the bar, turn on the lights. We may need to call the police. Who knows what's going to happen if we go down that dark alley? Worst idea ever. And friend number three, the only thing we know for certain is their primary value in life is friendship. He says, I don't care. We can go down the dark alley, go back to the bar, turn on the light. It doesn't matter as long as we stick together, because that's what matters. We're a little drunk and I love you guys. So the moral of the story is not one of those people needed to check in with themselves before making a decision to see if they were 18 to 24, 25 to 36, 37 to 45, or if they were male or female, or had a BA or an MBA or a PhD, or they earned $100,000 a year, had a white collar job, what country they lived in. None of that matters. People do not look at their demographics and say, gee, based on that, I should make a decision. We all make all of our decisions consciously or subconsciously because we're chasing a set of values that are unique to us. Now, it's not just me and my cute little story. As you guys know, most of the audiences I talk to do not know that most fields of behavioral science are in agreement on this. If you look at neuroscientists, they'll talk to you about the prefrontal cortex of your brain being like the CEO of your brain. And the CEO's job is to boss you around, to take all the incoming data and decide how we're going to react to everything, what our emotions are going to be, what our decisions are going to be. And your prefrontal cortex only uses one set of filters to do all that work, and that's your values. If something comes along and family is one of your most important values, something comes along that's been good for your family, you're going to run towards that and feel happy when you get it. And if something comes along that might be bad for your family, your prefrontal cortex is saying, okay, I'm going to make you feel anxious now until you get that thing out of your system and get it away from you, because it's a bad thing. We're running away from that one. Psychologists talk about confirmation bias and about how people can't help themselves with a poorly worded research question, but to say yes to the things they already agree with that are important to them that match their values. So it can be a detriment to good research, but it's also a pretty powerful indicator that values are driving how people behave and make decisions. And then, as you know, more than anyone, sociologists study large groups of people and why this group went and did this thing and this other group went and did this other thing. And it always comes down to these people valued this stuff and these people valued these other things instead. So widespread agreement about not much between all these various different fields of human behavior science, but about that one thing, that what our values are determines everything we do in our lives. It's like our operating system. If you know what someone's values are, you know who they are as a person and how they're going to behave. So how could we turn this into a tool that would actually do the things we needed it to do in a business context? So we needed a model for this. And so we came up with the Human Genome Project as a thing that we could model our work after. And the Human Genome Project went and calculated and collected all the various component parts that are necessary in order to understand what kind of a biological human we're dealing with here. Depending on which of those component parts are in your particular makeup, you were male or female, tall or short, blonde or redhead, various amounts of pigment in your skin. That's the hardware for a human. So we did the same thing. We went and collected all the various component parts that are necessary to understand the software that runs that hardware, the software that will tell us whether someone is an environmentalist with a strong family streak and has a ton of ambition, or whether somebody is instead all about personal growth and friendship and service to others. If you know what someone's values are, you have the software for the hardware. So we've built this massive data set. We're now at 750,000 surveys we've done around the world. That's 750,000. I always like to remind people that every single one of those has been read by hand. It's not AI and machine learning and robots from outer space. It's all been read by Kalym, and it's all been coded and put into a massive data set. And that massive data set is built in such a way that we can look at the target audience for anything, anywhere on the earth. People who are going to buy this remote control in Belgium versus the people who are going to buy this remote control in China, and say, this is what these people care about and how they live their lives. And over here in Belgium, they care about something slightly different. And that's why they're choosing this particular remote control. Now we understand how to talk to these two different groups of people around the same thing in a slightly different way based on what they value. That's incredibly valuable information if you're in marketing or business and you're trying to understand, how do I get people to make a decision that I'd like them to make? Decisions are all about what people value. So for your customers, we can say, here's what they value. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's revolutionary, in fact, and it's never been done before. One of the outcomes of this particular data set and all these studies all over the world and all these surveys that we've gone through is we've figured out there's only 56 core human values, which is a pretty interesting number when you consider in context that there's only 88 keys on a piano keyboard. It's more complicated to learn how to play Happy Birthday on the piano than it is to understand all the various things that drive what humans do all over the world, all day, every day. It's not that many. Those poor geneticists, they have 3 million component parts they have to worry about combining and recombining. We only got 56. So now it's math. Now it's fairly straightforward math to be able to understand which ones a group of people have in common, so that we can talk to them about the things that they actually care about. So we refer to it sometimes as a global inventory of core human values, a directory of how people make decisions, or my favorite one, it's the operating system for being human. Now, our data plays really nice with all the other data that companies tend to use. Demographics still an important tool. You need to understand sometimes that people who are going to buy reading glasses, for example, are going to be a certain age. That's fine. It's good. But assuming that the people who are buying those reading glasses are all the same as each other, just because of that one thing that's the same, that's wrong. And that's what we've been doing for decades, if not millennia. Demographics still necessary to describe a group of people. Psychographics, it's a good record of how they've behaved and felt so far. But all that data we collect psychographically about people all over the world, there's a problem with it, and that it's all comes from exactly the same place, no matter how it's collected. And that's the past. Because as soon as you can write it down, it's historical. That's how things have happened up until now. But what we're trying to do is to get people to make a decision tomorrow that we'd like them to make. So we need to understand how they're going to make that decision. You need value graphics as part of the three-legged stool so that you're standing on stable ground. Let's look at some data. So this is a very, very tip of the iceberg from what we can find out when we look at a particular audience for one of our clients or the projects we're working on. This is a chart that shows you the top 10 values plus the togetherness values. I'll talk about those in just a second. For Forest and Bird, which is a not-for-profit in your neck of the woods. I assume you all know who those guys are. They're one of the biggest ones out there doing all kinds of really great work. And so this is their donors versus the general population of Oceania, which is where they're operational. So it's really interesting to see that personal responsibility, which is a value about people who are driven by personal responsibility, want to be the ones who make stuff happen. They want to feel like they're responsible for the needle moving on whatever it is they're thinking about. Health and well-being, really important to people who are donors. And then also positive environments. We see that frequently when we're looking at environmental causes, that folks want to be surrounded by positivity. They don't want to hear that we're all going to hell in a handbasket and the melting glaciers are going to drown us all in the next couple of weeks. What they want to hear is that we're making progress. Thanks to people like you, we're seeing the needle move in the right direction. So frame things up positively. So if you're trying to find donors and maybe increase the amount that they're giving for Forest and Bird, we need to be talking to them about how this donation is going to help them they're the ones who are going to help move the needle. They're the ones who will be personally responsible for the things that we're able to accomplish together. It's going to make us all healthier and well and feeling like we're part of a better benefited ecosystem. And that we need to talk to them about this in a very positive way. So it's quite simple now that we've done 750,000 surveys, around 436 metrics across 180 countries in 152 languages. Very, very complex to get to this place where we can quite simply say, these are the things you need to be focused on. I randomly chose those three because those data points seem to me to be far more important to Forest and Bird donors than they are to the general population. Here's another example, some work we did for the United Nations Foundation around a particular thing that they're interested in, which is eradicating malaria. We're all interested in doing that. So we helped them identify the values that would motivate a particular group of donors that they were very interested in, which was highly specialized definition for this group around medical professionals who'd been involved in subtropical diseases or been part of the Peace Corps, and then on and on and on. A very specific group of people they wanted to understand. And to talk to this group of people, community is off the charts, the most important thing to them. It's not a very important thing to the rest of the population of the United States. So without value graphics data, the United Nations would not have known that in order to talk to this group in the most effective way, they needed to be able to draw some bridges here and help people in this group understand how their donation was going to impact communities and how that donation was in fact making them part of a community of people who are making a difference around this particular issue. And I'm starting to run low on time, so I'm not going to dwell as much on the rest of the data points here, but I think I'm making my case and showing you how this sociological data is impacting some really interesting things. This is another batch of data we did for the Environmental Defense Fund, another great not-for-profit group that is working to help this poor old planet of ours survive. And look at how important experiences are to this particular segment of their population. So talking to them about how those donations are actually going to be enabling the kinds of experiences that they're looking for and how they're going to be contributing to an organization that's perhaps saying thank you in an experiential way. Whatever they can do to talk about experiences as they talk to these people will make them, we like to say, magnetic, be magnetically attractive, because these folks are waking up every morning looking for how they can have more experiences in their life. Now, here's a couple of examples of what I like to call corporate amplification. So IMEX is one of the largest trade show organizations on earth. And thanks to our work with them, they have now removed age from their databases, and they no longer ask anybody what their age is when they're applying for jobs or filling out forms to come to a trade show. Age has disappeared at IMEX. That's a pretty big win. Pretty excited about that one. PayPal around the world have rewritten their internal target audience descriptions, the way they talk internally and the way they look out to the outside world. They're looking at people based on values. They're still using demographics and psychographics, but like I showed you with the three-legged stool, they're layering value graphics on top of that work. We do a lot of work with real estate developers, primarily because of my background in that sector. They're not just marketing using this data, they're building buildings specifically to make people happier because they know what they care about, what their values are in advance of starting to design the building. So they're putting in features and amenities and things in the common areas that they know will resonate and make people happier in their homes. That's a pretty big accomplishment when we have values-driven buildings being designed. We have textbooks being rewritten in the marketing field to include reference to value graphics as a way to understand people and motivate target audiences, in addition to the old-fashioned methods of demographics and psychographics. I'm going to wrap up here by just the way we always wrap up, the way I always talk to my corporate clients that are listening to me, or to the audiences that I speak to on stages all over the world, by saying that this is all great. I've shown you some data that's going to help you. I always get up and say, you know, here's specific data for the target audiences you're interested in. So go and use that and become a values-driven organization, make some more money, do all that stuff. But at the end, this is much, much bigger than that, much bigger. It's bigger, in fact, than all of us and all the things we're trying to accomplish. You see, those demographics that we've been relying on for so long, they're as much as 90% deficient. We go back to that story I told you about being in the room with the Bob and Sally's and the mysterious 90%. We now know, based on this massive data set, that you can look at any label, any demographic label, age, income, gender, marital status, all the labels we're all familiar with. And you look at them all around the world, say, how similar are the people inside those labels, inside those cohorts? They're on average 10.5% similar to each other. And so that's why we're only getting 10, 11, 12, 13% of the people in the room using demographics that match the demographic target audience descriptions that we spend $1 million of our client money. The other 90% of the people in the room were there because we were accidentally saying something that aligned with their values. Well, now it doesn't have to be an accident. Now we can do that on purpose. So demographics are 90% deficient. But here's the big part. They're incredibly divisive, damaging, and dangerous, because the longer we continue to use demographics to look at the people in the world, our target audiences, the people we encounter, the way we just think about other people, the longer we're perpetuating demographic stereotypes. And demographic stereotypes may seem silly and harmless. You know, Generation Z is like this, and boomers are terrible with technology, and young people are unreliable, and it's all kind of funny, and we talk about it in the media all the time. But all of those things are like fuel for some pretty terrible fires that are going on around the world right now. Things like racism and ageism and sexism and homophobia, and you know the rest of that list. These are demographically induced ways of looking at people, and they're only reinforced as we continue to look at people based on these same kinds of filters. So if we can provide the world with a different set of filters, if we can just take advantage of the fact that value graphics are a way to look at each other that rises above all of those kinds of dangerous stereotypes, if we just change the way we look at people, we're going to change what happens with our work. We don't need new factories. We don't need new machines. We just need to change the way we look at people, and we can change what happens in our work. And if we just change the way we look at each other, we're going to eventually, slowly, incrementally, but for sure, end up changing the world. And that's what drives all of us at the Value Graphics to do the work we do all day long. And that fun little thing is a QR code, like you didn't know that. What a crazy technological comeback those have made in the last 2 years. Nobody knew. We were all ignoring QR codes, and then suddenly along comes COVID. Now that's everybody knows what a QR code is. So if you want to use your phone and zap that thing, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page, and you can be my new best friend, and we'll share stories and laugh, and it'll be a great time.
Oh, thank you so much, David, and thank you to you, Kalym, as well. That was a wonderful half hour. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing the progression of how you can take all the skills that you learn in sociology, kind of throw it to their face about the stereotypes and sort of negative feelings about quantitative research, about how numbers are too hard to deal with, about how it's better to hear people's stories, and reframe that and actually like, well, we can get your stories through quantitative research, and here's what we can do with them. Here's how we can funnel this back into business and try to change how we think about how we relate to other people and how we can utilize this in the business world. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have, yes.
One last thing I want to throw in here. Since we have this cast of thousands, I'm going to make a little offer. If you can all get Kalym your mailing address, what I'd be happy to do is we're going to send you a copy of my book. And that's all about the North American data set, because that's how we started, Canada and the United States. But it gives you some more information around how we do what we do, and be happy to do that as a thank you for showing up and putting in all the hard work and being here and organizing a conference and all that stuff. And having a new puppy, that's hard work too. So you've got a book as well.
Wow, thank you so much, David, for your generosity. I'm sure that there'll be a valuable resource that we can help share with others as well once we've all had a go at reading it. So we have got some time left, and we can open this up for questions and answers. So I know there's only a few of us in the room, so I feel like I don't need to go through that questions and answers etiquette. But if anyone has any pressing questions, please feel free to turn on your microphones and step in. If you're not comfortable asking that question, sorry, you can private message that to me and I will say it on your behalf. And if no one has any questions, I've got a few. So I'll open this up to the crowd, the small crowd of wonderful people here tonight. Has anyone got anything they'd like to comment on or question our wonderful speakers?
I had something, if that's all right.
Thank you. Caitlin, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been absolutely fantastic. I actually work in the I'm researching edible insects, and I see so often in the consumer studies, you know, things like, oh, men think this and older people think this. And so I can really see how this kind of an approach would be valuable in that space. So it's so fascinating. With the values, do you consider those fixed? Or do you think that they change over time and depending on your situation?
Well, what I've learned from a very smart man who's studied sociology for a while, named Kalym, is that our values are formed in our late childhood, early adolescence, during our socialization, and that they're pretty much ours for the rest of our lives. I like to say, we're not an octopus. You don't get to chop one off and grow one on again later in life. So the way we react to the world around us, our behaviors and decisions and emotions, those are going to change all the time. They're going to change every 25 minutes. It's one of the reasons it's so ridiculous to be making decisions based on what did somebody do yesterday? How many times have they bought edible insects in the past? What do they think about snack foods in general? That stuff is going to change for all kinds of reasons. But the values that are triggering those things, that are driving those behaviors and decisions and emotions, those are going to be concrete and they're not going to change. Like diamonds, values are forever.
Cool, thank you for that.
You're welcome. And listen, when you get the book, I'm not sure where your market is. Are you primarily going to be selling in Oceania? Are you looking at the United States? Like what's...
I'm just a PhD student, so I'm just following around the people who are looking to sell insects and seeing what they're up to and that sort of thing.
Ah, I see. Okay. The reason I'm asking is there's a quiz in the book that will help them understand what might be driving their consumers if they administer that quiz to a few different people. But it's based on the data from the United States and Canada. Yeah, I'll stop there. I could keep going as you like. As you can see, I like to talk, so I could fill up the rest of this hour and the next hour after that. So let's see if there's any more questions before I carry on.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thank you, David. That was a great question. And it's really great to see how these ideas and this initiative can kind of correlate to the research that you're doing, which also sounds really fascinating. So are there any other questions from our crowd tonight? While we think of some, I have one for Kalym. So you spoke about the importance of networking and how that has opened up opportunities for you, and through that has helped establish your credibility within the space. Particularly if you want to take the stereotype, if you will, as a kind of marginalized researcher working in quantitative research in the sociological field. So how have you done that networking? And how has that led to this connection with David?
SAANZ. That's my answer, SAANZ. In terms of networking in sociology, SAANZ has been huge for me. The more people that I have met through SAANZ, the more comfortable I've become in my own skin, because I've understood that people are doing different things. Regardless of what the stereotypes are out there around different types of research, people are doing different things. And when you have those conversations at a conference or on a Zoom like this, you start to see that. In terms of kind of marrying the two worlds together, I did some tutoring in marketing at Massey for a couple of years, and having conversations with those folks and understanding the value that the business world actually puts on thinking from the social science world made me not only a better researcher, but a better conversationalist with people like David when we started working together. So it's a combination of both. Like Casimir was talking about last month, the importance of having different networks and speaking to different people cannot be undervalued.
I can answer a little bit around that as well, because in my world, networking is incredibly important too. And when I started, we were all students, other than, well, even Kalym, you're a student. We're all students of life. We're all students always. There's one great way to start building a network, and that's just volunteer. You are already doing that, but just volunteer, 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 volunteer. The more people you can start to get to know because you're volunteering around things that you're interested in, the faster your network will grow. Just be as big of a help to as many people as you can, as often as possible. And before you know it, you'll wake up one day and go, wow, I got a great big network. It's really that simple.
Thanks for your insights there. So it sounds that, through this connection, through these storytelling processes, through just connecting with people, you're able to develop your networks. So I guess a follow-up question from that is, if you're bringing in this new way of thinking in the business world, the sociological thinking, it seems like the language that you use is really important. Now, you're obviously, David, a very, very good storyteller. So, yeah, how have you found corporations' reception to sociological ideas have been? I mean, outside of just showing them the monetary impact that it can have.
Yeah, there's a translation process that we've been going through for the last 7 years since Kalym and I started working together. I mean, he taught me what I know about this work. And because he's an academic, he used his language to teach me about this work. And I turned around and started to talk to the business world like an academic. And that didn't go over so well. And it's taken 7 years to figure out that in my world, particularly, it's a weird thing. The higher up the food chain you go, the closer you get to talking to the CEO of a major corporation, the simpler you need to be able to explain things. The people closer to the top have so many things going on in their heads. All they want is a clear, concise, simple story that makes them go, I get that, and I can now repeat that. That's the winning formula. If I go in with all kinds of fancy language and lots of documents and things I need them to read and understand, they're just checking out and they just aren't going to pay any attention to it. So the simpler you can make things, the more repeatable you can make things. And I find that the best way to do that is to tell them a little story, give them a little metaphor, give them a little simile, and they walk away talking about that stuff. That little story I told you about 3 friends in an alley at midnight, I'm so tired of telling that story. It's like, Mick Jagger getting up and singing that song he has to sing again that he's been singing for the last 20 years. But that story comes back to me so often from people saying, I saw you speak at a conference 3 years ago. And then last week I was in the boardroom and someone was and I told them the story about 3 friends in an alley at midnight. And they were like, we got to get this guy. Those simple little stories. And I'm going to just carry on with this for one last second here. The closest I get to reading and thinking in an academic way is my passion for the art world. I collect art. I go to art openings, and there's always academic articles written in the front of the brochures and the catalogs from some of these exhibits. And it's been one of my pet peeves since the beginning, is that those academic articles in the art journals make it impenetrable for anybody except the person who wrote it and maybe 2 of the other people that they know who are on the same research track. So I get that there's a little flexing that's required in academic writing to kind of show that you know all the lingo and that you're one of the insiders, but it's got to be a way to, I guess my advice is, as you are working through your academic careers, do all that stuff you got to do. That's the game. But also be able to talk about your research in a way that other people can go, wow, that's fascinating, that thing that you just found out and that you did. Don't make it so that it's so hard for people to love what you're doing that you aren't able to create some attention and attract some interest and get the funding you need for the next study you want to do. I think being a good, simple storyteller is a great skill, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish in life. I'm getting nods from that one. I think we all agree that sometimes that reading you got to do is just like, what are they trying to say to me? Why can't they just tell me?
Yeah, I think that's some really great advice for my own thesis writing, rather than just getting lost away in the world of theory, but bringing it back down to a story or experience that you can share with someone. So I guess my final question connects to that before we wrap up tonight. So Kalym, how do you tell the story of the value of quantitative research? Because you talked about its value and you talked about its value outside of academia. So how do you tell that story? How do you make people connect to numbers when a lot of people think numbers and quant research is just too tricky to get your head around?
I invite David to be a co-speaker when I'm invited. It's stories. It absolutely is stories. It's taking, like I briefly touched on, when I first started doing market research, it was a bunch of statistics and it was a table. And that's how I first started doing research for David 7-8 years ago. A bunch of tables with a bunch of statistics on it. That's not real people. Being able to take those statistics and turn them into stories about real people is what makes people connect with the data. I've found through the Value Graphics project and through learning from David's speaking style and storytelling ability that my presentation of data is easier for other people to understand now. So the simple answer is stories. Turn the data into real people.
Yeah, stories are the currency of our relationships.
Yeah.
We've all been spending time tonight trading some stories. It's been kind of a one-way trade, but because we've told you some stories, it's like, you know, you feel like we all know each other a little bit better. And if we had another hour to spend together and I could hear some of your stories, we'd actually leave this Zoom meeting as friends, because stories are what we trade. It's our currency when it's about trying to connect with people. It all goes back to stories. It always does. And the best ones are the ones that you can tell that relate to what people value. So if you know what people's values are and you can frame a story up that speaks to those values. I have a friend who told me once that the secret to a good story is to speak into their listening. So what people are listening for is something to do with their values. If you can figure that out and speak into their listening, well, now you're an Academy Award level storyteller. If that's the end, I do have one last thing I'd like to say. Is that okay? I know I'm a bull in a china shop. I'm taking over the whole night here, but if anyone is interested in how sociology and understanding what people value works outside of the academic world, this is your moment. Every organization out there is trying to desperately find a way to be more than just a profit-making machine. In fact, there was a recent study done by the Harvard Business Review where, I can't remember the numbers, but let's say 50% of the CEOs out there who were polled said that their primary focus right now, numbers higher than that, 70%, 80%, so that their primary focus right now is trying to find the intersection of purpose and profit. And that's a massive shift. To hear global CEOs talking about how purpose is as important as profit. There's a need in the business world right now, in the corporate world, for people who understand people, who can talk to purpose, who can talk to values, who can talk to drivers, who can talk to all the things that a sociological background and the sociological imagination can bring to the table. Now, the corporate world's just waking up to this. They're just deciding suddenly that this is important. And you know what did it is COVID. The whole world reacted to one input. One thing happened and we all reacted. It was like the largest sociological experiment in present day memory. So corporations are watching this, and now they're watching what's being called the Great Resignation. People are all quitting their jobs because they're chasing their values. And the corporations are all going, wow, these values that's a kooky new way to think about things. Who can help us with that? Well, the answer is people who understand the social sciences. This is your moment. If this is of interest to you and you're driven by trying to make a difference in ways that are impactful, there's a burgeoning need right now for people who understand people and understand what motivates people and how people behave out there in the business world. So it's a path that's open and has only recently thrown its doors wide open. And this is your moment if that's something that you're interested in. So I would encourage you to pursue it if that's something that you're keen on. Because as Kalym said, your why is up to you. But if this could be your why, strike while the iron's hot.
Well, thank you, both of you. On that inspirational note and encouragement note, we will bring tonight to an end. So if this is something that you have enjoyed coming along to, please share. We like having you around. And more importantly, this recording is going to be available so we can all watch back on it and kind of harness the important points of information shared tonight. And you can also share it with anyone else who you think might be interested. And if you haven't done so already, you might also like to join up with SAANZ. So this organization is all geared towards supporting students and helping build the sociological community. And like our wonderful speakers have shared tonight, the sociological community can extend beyond sociology. It can go into the business world, it can go into the sciences. So this is a good starting point. The organization has great competitions and essay writing competitions available where you can take part, get some coin, and of course some social recognition. You can also come along to our annual conference being held in December this year. And if you're a member, you get wonderful discounts and other exclusive offers and perks. So please do join and come along. So we really look forward to seeing you again next month, same time, same place. We're going to have something special. We're going to have a professional skills workshop where we'll be hearing some more tips and tricks of the trade about how to show off valuable skills like our wonderful speakers have talked about tonight, how to really ace that CV and show those skills off. But until then, please join me in and doing a really big thank you for Kalym and David tonight for all the great information that they have shared and the inspiration they have hopefully instilled in all of you. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I had. So thank you and ka kite.